Aloha mai kako. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Moana Nui podcast. I am Moana, your host tonight. And today we have a very special guest here on the show tonight. We have Davie Yarborough. She also goes by Davie Celeste. She's an artist, educator, entrepreneur, and healer. Her passions include writing, education, experimenting with music, storytelling, and finding new ways to be creative. Davie has over 10 years of school-based experience in the field of education and over 20 years of experience as a private instructor. She attended George Washington University, where she earned a bachelor's in English and a master's of education in secondary and special education. She's also a Fulbright Scholar, which I think is really cool. And during her fellowship, she traveled to India to study different learning styles and how disabilities are recognized and navigated throughout the country. She's also a firm believer in the idea that all education is special education and is passionate about helping students learn how they learn. So without further ado, I'm happy to have Davie on our show tonight.
Hi, hello.
Hi, aloha, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Perfect. I'm good. It's the end of 2020, so it's the last day. Let's go out strong.
Yes, all of that. All of that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. As I was doing, research on you and everything, I found a lot of similarities in terms of you're multi-passionate, right? You have your hands in a lot of different things.
Absolutely.
Tell us how, a little bit about yourself, what you do, how you grew up and how you found yourself in education.
Okay. All right. So I'm originally from Washington, D.C., super DC person in the sense that I rep DC to the fullest. It is, the place that raised me is where a lot of my family still is. And it'll always be my first home. And that's definitely where so many of my passions kind of came to fruition. So prior to 2016, that's where I was. I went to undergrad and grad in DC. I taught in DC. I settled down in DC. It was my first and middle initial of DC. It's real. So that is where my story starts. I am from a family of artists. Both my parents are musicians. And my family is not, do you play? It's what do you play? So I grew up, dabbling on a lot of different instruments. You'll see that I say that I experiment with music. I don't really identify as a musician because my parents are professional musicians, and I don't put in that type of work to feel like I can claim that. But that background and that the village that raised me, that artistic village, definitely contributed to my interests in different arts and whatnot. So my dad is actually a retired DC public school teacher. He was in the classroom for 40 years. And originally, when I went off to college, I wanted to own my own multilingual radio station. That was my plan. I wanted to study Romance languages, and I wanted to create this radio station that, had different broadcasts that would get broadcast in different languages. And I still have some interest in that, and I love languages. So I thought I was going to school for broadcast. That was the plan. That, up until I think my sophomore year, when I actually did have to declare a major, because I went through about 5 of them. I was really running from education. My dad, watching my dad do all of what he was doing, and in some ways, I'm an only child, feeling like competing, in a lot of ways with that, you working with all these kids and they don't even half the time appreciate you, and you could be home hanging out with me, I do not look like the profession I want to be in. Okay, no, thankless job. I'm good.
Right.
So I ran and I ran. And one thing I have learned in my life is I'm never telling the universe what I am or am not going to do anymore, because that's what I end up doing. And if I want the universe to support me, I got to stop saying that. So what ended up happening is I did an internship my sophomore year in college, where I was paired with a high school. And in the high school that I was at, it was Ballou Senior High School in Southeast DC. And I was working with students, you know, I'm sorry, I can't see you anymore. And I don't know if you're still here.
I'm here.
Oh, okay, cool. Sorry. So I was working in a Ballou Senior High School as an intern with their video production class, and some of the students were only like a couple years younger than me, so that was a kind of a wild experience. But while I was there and helping them work on their diction and you know, editing and things like that, I was like, oh man, okay, maybe this is what I'm supposed to be doing, you know, and seeing a lot of the like kind of disparities between like educational disparities. And I'd already had a passion in for literacy already. So this was kind of like, okay. So I called my dad and I was like, hey, so I think I want to be a teacher. I want to be a teacher and I want to be a philanthropist. I said, but I don't think I'm not rich enough to be a philanthropist. And I remember him saying, you don't have to be rich to be a philanthropist at all. You know, that you can find different ways to give without being, you know, incredibly, you know, financially wealthy. And so that's kind of the direction that I set out in after that, as it relates to be an educator and to also, you know, be a philanthropist, to be able to give back, specifically, you know, in the beginning, especially to DC, because DC gave me so much. And then to expand that to different parts of my community across the country, across the world. So, that's kind of how I started in the direction of education. I went back to graduate school because I got my degree in English finally. And I went through broadcast and photojournalism, and none of them ended up on paper. They were just like, oh, I'll just do this, and can I try this over here? And then it was like, okay. And then when I realized, okay, what's going to best support me in going into education, so I decided to do English, which I have a very strong background in prior to that, because that's actually, I went to Yellington School of the Arts in Washington, D.C., so for high school. So my arts discipline was literary media. So poetry, prose, radio, television, film, you name it. So that transition to English was pretty simple for me, and it made the most sense. And then from there, I went back to, I took a year in as a teaching assistant in a second grade class, all of whom are in college now, which is wild to me, but because they were 7 and they're not anymore. But I started as a teaching assistant in an elementary school, and I just to try and see which grade, because I thought I might want to do elementary, and I was like, you know what, I like playing with them, I don't like teaching them. So I ended up going back to school for particularly high school, and so and ended up right back at my alma mater as a English teacher, specifically teaching support English for students who were oftentimes 2 to 4 grade reading levels below. So
gotcha.
Kind of just varied. Sometimes they were also like it was all over the place, but yeah, it was beautiful to be back at my alma mater, beautiful to connect with those students, a lot of whom I'm still in touch with, and it was definitely what I was supposed to do. You know, I love working with students. Like, they're mine. They're all mine. You know? So that's how I got into education.
Yeah, that's really cool that you worked at multiple levels, like both at the elementary and at high school. You know, I've talked to my sister, was a teacher. She's, you know, stay-at-home mom now, but she taught where she started, I think, at first grade, and then she also ended up teaching 5th grade math for a while. And very, very similar to you, right? Like, these are my babies. Like, I am molding them into the, you know, the human beings that they will be. And she took so much pride in the work that she does. And so I can kind of understand where you're coming from in terms of, like, you know, your dad and wanting him to be like, what about me? You know, It's hard to strike that balance sometimes.
It is. Definitely is.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about, seeing the educational disparities, amongst students. How do you feel like since that time, back when you were in college, how do you feel it's improved? Has it improved? What work is still left to do?
Hmm. Uh, I think that we have a lot more, lot more resources, a lot more research. I
Mm-hmm.
think that unfortunately, in most school settings, there are so many things and components to take into consideration that a lot of times the priority
Mm-hmm.
of whether it be literacy, whether it be education in general, whether it be centering the needs of students, oftentimes gets lost because there's so many other things a school has to do. A school has to stay open. A school has
Right.
to, so the business side of it, I think oftentimes really takes away and makes it really difficult for schools to focus in on the things that matter most. So I feel like when I was coming through, I think so. My first introduction to kind of disparities as it relates to Washington, D.C. was actually in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I was a ninth grader and I was paired with a student, and my teacher, kind of took me to the side. I guess she knew that I had the discernment that, that she could trust me to say, like, hey, I want to pair you with this student, but I need you to understand that they don't know how to read. And I'm like, how do you get to the ninth grade? And I'm asking her, I'm like, how does that happen? Like, how do you get to the night? And I remember her saying, talking about students and slipping through the cracks and being passed from one grade to another, and how, you think about it, and it made me angry, like, for this student. And I remember doing the research, and I think at that time, a third of our residents were functionally illiterate. And I know that those numbers, from what I understand, those numbers have significantly improved since then. And it's still an issue, right? If you think about it from the standpoint of standardized testing and prioritize standardized testing over like individual student needs, then you might, as a school, decide to pass a student along so that it doesn't seem as though they have these deficiencies rather than addressing the deficiencies themselves. And shout out to my school, shout out to Ellington, because that student, the special education program that we had, worked with that student, gave them the supports that they needed, and they graduated being able to read. They graduated, and went on to, they have a family and they're working, and, there are so many different efforts and interventions that oftentimes can be put in place and that are being put in place. It's that oftentimes having to fight against the other systems that exist and have to exist, that aren't necessarily in a position to prioritize the things that we're prioritizing inside the classroom. So it's like I think there's a lot more awareness,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think that's great. I think we still have a lot of work to do, and I think in some places, we are doing it a lot better. And I think also, one of the things, I think it's also really important to take into consideration that just because we have more resources doesn't mean that that's necessarily, the
Mm-hmm.
answer. Sometimes, it's really taking a look at. You don't necessarily need money to fix the problem, or to fix or to intervene. When it comes to students, we've taught students how to read with fewer resources. You know what I mean? Like with less resources than we think we sometimes need at this point. That really to focus in on, it doesn't need to look shiny and fancy, but what we do need to do is go deep into these individual needs of each student, which is why that what I said about all education is special education. I truly believe that. It's
Mm-hmm.
we're all learning differently. We're all trying to access information in a different way. And we have to find a way as educators to meet each individual student in our class where they are in the way in which they learn. And so, because of I also say because of more of an acceptance of special education programs, learning support programs, I think that is also helping as well. But yeah, we still have a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do.
Yeah. I mean, I love that approach though, like the understanding the individual needs of the students. Um, but I could see how that could be definitely in conflict with systems, right? Because like individual attention takes time, and just the resources kind of look different.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how much of a role do you think like school leadership, like the people who, who are in the principal role or, as the teachers, like, do you feel like it's really the people that make the difference? Or, like I know I've had like different types of teachers, like some that have been more effective, others that are not. How important do you feel like that is in the classroom?
I think that a lot of our best teachers will make a difference regardless of whether they have that support from their school or their administration. And that isn't to say, and that isn't a should, I'm saying that they often do, because there are a lot of factors and components that can prevent a teacher from being able to, focus in and do the job that they feel like they can do. I think that having strong leadership and also leadership that isn't so far removed from the classroom is incredibly important. There are so many, times when you can tell an administrator hasn't been in the classroom for a minute, or they've forgotten what it's like to navigate a classroom because of some of the things that they're saying, or, some of the things, that you're like, I need this. And they're looking at you like, huh? And you're like, you would have needed this too, when last time you were in the classroom, what do you mean? But at the same time, the things or the priorities that they have to inherit, once they become administrators, sometimes aren't necessarily aligned with making sure that each individual student has what they need, and that can be, I think that your leadership can make a huge difference in how the institution runs and how teachers feel supported. I watch teachers all the time provide for their students without that support, so as a teacher, you're not as worried about making sure that the school stays open, right?
Right.
And so, there's some, I have to empathize with the fact that the priorities are different. But I do really wish, sometimes some of the things that I hear that I've heard administrators say, I'm just like, do y'all take the same class? Like, do y'all take the exact same class? Did you really think that made sense when you said that thing? You know what I mean? Like, it was like, you just justified this, underpaying this person in a way that you would be outraged if somebody did that for your job. You know what I mean? So there's it's like, did y'all take the same class? Do you have, is there a company line for all of you, as it relates to, these responses, or, how you respond to me needing something, or how you respond, it's, it can be a real challenge. So yes, leadership definitely matters. Things will still continue to happen. Great things will still continue to happen as long as we have passionate teachers. We also lose a lot of passionate teachers because of poor leadership.
Yeah, I think that's a very, that statement can be applied broadly in terms of leadership, right? Like, I feel like I think the data supports it, that like, that's one of, if not the top, one of the top, I guess, catalysts for turnover in a team, a school, a company, a business, whatever, right? Like it's the disconnect, with the leadership.
Absolutely.
And so listening to this, I'm kind of like, oh, this sounds very similar to, some of the things that I deal with on my job. It's not teaching at all, but, when you're trying to be a leader and trying to maintain that balance of like being in touch with, the folks who are still actively doing the work and, doing the real work. And then also trying to make sure that like all the things that people don't see, like in the background, it is being managed. So I can definitely empathize with the difficulties of juggling those priorities.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, in your work with the children, I know you've worked with the high school level. What are some strategies that you have found to be effective in helping them learn? I know like different folks learn in different ways, but do you have some like top ones that kind of stand out at the top of your mind?
Definitely, yes. This might seem like super simple, but the developing rapport is
Mm,
huge. Because when you're developing rapport, you're also getting some of those interests, some of the things that make students tick, some of the things that motivate them, and being able to use those or utilize those things when you're helping them or when you're instructing them is so important, right? If you know that the student is incredibly passionate about something and you can draw it into whatever, or make it relatable to them in a way that it wasn't relatable before, that can make all of the difference in the world, right? We're all more likely to pay attention to things that we have interest in. And so if you can, apply things and make it real, like take it outside of the classroom, I think that's a big part of it. And of course, that's with any student. And that's why I said with all education and special education, the majority of the strategies that I use to reach students with, for instance, documented learning differences or disabilities are strategies that should be used with every student. Most of those strategies would be, beneficial to any student that you come across. So the building of rapport is important. One of the things that I think is also really important is focusing on helping a student learn how they learn. So if you know that you have a student that is incredibly visual, they've got to be able to see it, then you want to focus in on different, if they're working on test taking, okay, what are some strategies, from visual strategies, to help you to retain that information, right? Same with auditory or kinesthetic. Some students have to interact with it in order to get it, or people, right? In general, I think that a lot of adults reach, adulthood without knowing kind of the best way in which they learn. So focusing in on that. Also, recognizing that, first of all, for a student with a documented learning difference, when I have to send that information to teachers, that's 6 or 7 teachers who are going to read that information in a very different way. They're going to have their own perceptions, their own understandings. And so making sure that, you're as clear as possible as it relates to kind of, giving them that. And that's why the rapport is important. Giving them some of what you've learned from that rapport, so that they don't prejudge your and that's normal, right? Like, it's a human thing to judge, but so that they're not prejudging a student and immediately, and the stigma of, a learning difference is then becomes their legacy when they step into the classroom. So one of the things I also really like to do, and I want to do more of, this is something that I'd like to do more of, is to talk to a student and say, what would you like a teacher to know before you step into their classroom? What would you like them to know about you? What's something that before they see a test score, before they see your diagnosis, before they see any of those things, what would you like them to know? Because if you can, when we think of first impressions, there are, I'm sure, plenty of things that we would love for other people to know before they meet us. And so that is, I think, really important too. In the beginning of this year, that was one of the first things that I did, was I went student by student, and I told teachers what I knew about each of those students. They're really passionate about this. They really, respond well to positive reinforcement. They really want to do well, and they struggle in this area. But if you keep pushing them, and encouraging them in a positive way, they'll get it. They just need some extra time, The other part of it is helping to try and destigmatize for the student learning differences. So for instance, one of the things that I say often when I sit down with a student, and I will walk them through, for instance, there's, evaluations that are done. A lot of them are very long. They take hours, right? For these psycho ed evaluations, as they're called. And they go all of these different academic panels and assessments in this to determine, if there is a diagnosis. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll sit down with the student and I'll be like, well, you're really strong in this area right here, right? Here's an area that it sounds like you've had some trouble navigating, and this is why. Like, this is what's behind it, and this is why this diagnosis is here. But let's talk about it for a moment. Like, how important, like, learning differences means that, first of all, the innovation in our world exists within deviation from the norm. So that means that anyone who sees or, learns differently, differently than what we consider the norm, there's innovation there. So it's like, okay, this is the diagnosis you have. And yes, there are some challenges you may face while you're trying to access a very linear way of thinking that isn't necessarily the best or beneficial way for anyone to think, right? But this is the way that we accept, and I want you to be able to navigate that system as well as know how you navigate, because there's a lot of innovation and beauty within the way in which you navigate the world that the world needs to see, that we want you to be able to share with the world. So it's like, know that you see something that no one else can see from your lens. Right. And a part of the reason that is, it's connected, right, to not only, of course, a diagnosis, but just you, who you are, right? No one can see the world the way that I see the world. And so all of the elements, the pieces of my identity, the instances, events in my life all contribute to that. And so, a diagnosis contributes to that as well, but even more, if you think about it from the standpoint of creativity and being able to see things that other people can't see, or make connections that other people wouldn't normally make, that's valuable. Mm-hmm. And I think that, that's so helping to try and destigmatize it in that way. And it's hard because sometimes it seems like you don't want to seem patronizing. Like, I truly believe that. So you don't want to sound patronizing. You're like, oh, come on, man, whatever, innovation, cause it's high school, but I really do believe that. And so trying to kind of really, I think it helps too, because if I'm sitting in front of a psychoed evaluation, I'm totally nerding out. So the students know, like, oh no, she's really serious. So let's look at this score, so.
Yes, give me all the data so I can analyze this and try to help you.
Absolutely. Well, I've had students go, man, that's what's been going on. I had no idea, and I'm so glad it has a name now. Like, yeah. And that is empowering, Be like, no, you're not. No, no, that you're right. Something was going on when you were trying to access this very linear way of thinking that isn't necessarily beneficial to everybody. You were wondering why all your peers were being able to do it this way, but you were struggling to do it this way. Well, no, there's nothing wrong with you. You see it differently. So let's talk about that. Let's figure that out. And let's find a workaround, mm-hmm. And I think, I think those are really important. So yeah, rapport, making sure that you really check in with those teachers to give them an opportunity to see the student first as a student before they see them as a diagnosis. And then also to help to try and destigmatize the learning difference for them and to empower them with that information.
That's amazing. I totally love that approach. It's very similar to the way I try to treat things too. It's, a lot of it is relationships and communication. I mean, it's a universal thing that can be applied to so many things in life, and, helping others to grow, and recognizing those strengths and helping them, lean on those, right? Like, you don't have to know everything, but let's just figure out how you understand things, so that we can help you, move forward.
Absolutely. Meet people where they are.
There you go. That's a great way to say it. Meet them where they are. So a lot of what you've talked about has also definitely translated into your nonprofit work, which is Free Your Soul. Free Your Soul and Your Mind.
Your soul and mind, yes.
Yeah. Yes. So tell us a little bit about that.
So in 2013, I was working at a school that was, so I was working at a school for 5 weeks. And I realized that there were some things that were going on at the school that were incredibly compromising to my integrity. And I didn't know I was like, oh my gosh, this is the highest paid position I've ever had. I'm like finally I'm gonna catch up on some bills. Like, like I am like, all right, here we go. Cause this is still the beginning of my career. And, it's just like, okay, I'm gonna have some savings now. You know what I mean? Like I was excited. So I was just like, when I realized what was going on, I was trying to figure out, okay, is there a way for me to be a part of the solution? And if I can't figure out how to be a part of the solution, I'm going to be a part of the problem and I'm going to have to leave. And it was one of the hardest decisions I had made. I had already made this just amazing connection with one student in particular who had really just had gone through it at the school. So we had bonded, and I was doing some good work with her, and I did not want to leave. I didn't want to be a part of the inconsistency in her life. And it was hard, but I knew that there was no possible way that I could be a part of the solution. I didn't have enough power. And, I knew the moment that everybody knew that I knew what was going on, that I was going to be out of there. Because I watched somebody else, get fired, and she had been there for like 8 years. So I was like, okay, let me make this move. I'm going to have to. I don't have a choice. And so I was kind of like, propelled into self-employment. I left. 2 weeks later, I established this LLC. At the time, it was called a DC Tutor LLC. So I did private instruction. I did college application process workshops. Like I really just I went in, on it. And that was I did it for a year, and so in the time that I was doing that, I sat in on an entrepreneur class, and I was sitting in an entrepreneur class. Now, I had been playing around with the acronym FYSM for a little bit prior, but I couldn't quite get the right meaning for it. So I was sitting in an entrepreneur class, and I was kind of just, taking some notes, and I was like, well, what do I want? I was like, it's something I wanted to work with. Like I wanted to do something, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And so I'm like, okay, what does it stand for? Like, what do I want this thing, that I've got going on to stand for? And so the idea behind it was like to create your own path. So I started writing down tenets: create your own path, to discover what makes you happy and pursue it, and to reject the status quo. So the idea was to basically get a community of people together who love what they do and want to encourage other people to do what they love to do by doing what they love to do. And so I was like, all right, so FYSM, okay, free yourself, and then free your soul and mind kind of came about in that way. So, and it was, basically, I knew, there was a lot going on at that time, right? Like my student loans had just come out of deferment. Like I was trying to figure out, like, I'm driving for Uber, I'm driving for Lyft, I might drive for Sidecar, I might substitute teach here and there. Like I'm doing a lot to try and kind of like, sustain myself. Especially going from, where I was, in this highest paying job that I just left after 5 weeks, so what ended up happening is I was like, I'm going to create this movement, to encourage people. And that was going to be, that wasn't the thing I was doing in my entrepreneur class, by the way. It was something else. But I was like, I wanted to do this. I've always liked myself to be a person who loves to bring people together, who loves to connect people. And so this was kind of that opportunity. And then also, I think about a year prior, I had lost a classmate, Ricky Battle. And he was a high school classmate, and he was somebody that was very much about these tenets. And I wanted to create a scholarship, a memorial scholarship in his name. So Free Your Soul and Mind, one of the first things or initiatives that Free Your Soul and Mind had was this scholarship, which we still give out every single year to a student at Duke Ellington School of the Arts in the Literary Media Department. As well as now we do give one to College Bound, a student that participates in College Bound Inc., which is a college preparatory program nonprofit in DC, because Ricky participated in both. He was someone who lived two lives in one. He was someone who, did a whole bunch of different things and lived his life. And when he was tired of a place, he moved to another place. And by the time he passed, he was 25 when he passed. He had his own PR firm. He was very much somebody who wanted to make sure that the people in his community were supported. Some of the things that I remember doing is attending events that he had kind of like curated for different people, like an album release party for one of our classmates, or, really was about supporting the arts. He was also somebody who came from very humble beginnings and spent some time in foster care. And so he did a lot of also work volunteering with fostered youth. And he was just somebody who really put himself behind the people he cared about, and he showed up in a really, really profound way. And so that scholarship is in his memory, but like so much of the spirit of Free Your Soul Mind is from that. So basically that's how it started, and then what it kind of grew to be. So recently I incorporated while we were in quarantine, and basically it is a now incorporated or as a nonprofit, and it provides creative spaces for creative thinkers through networking, mentorship, scholarship, and artist residencies. And so it is very much still about the community of people, who love what they do, encouraging other people to do what they love to do by doing what they love to do. So to give an example, the sweatshirt that you're wearing, right, was Create Unapologetically is actually a partnership between me and Native Tongue Apparel, which is run by Keziah Snipe, who is one of my day one supporters. She might have bought my first t-shirt at an event that I went to, which is just funny, right? Full circle. And so she's one of our day ones, but she's also a literary coach. And so one of the ways to kind of give the example of do what you love to do by encouraging other people to do what you love to do by doing what you love to do is she's a literary coach, and we have a artist in residence program that is for either aspiring or self-identifying poets who have not yet published and want to work towards publishing their first series of poems or chapbook. And so what we do is we fund their work with a literary coach to help them to move forward in that project. And so we have 2 artists in residence, participants this year. This is our first year doing it. And so Keziah loves literary coaching. These poets love poetry. So Keziah is encouraging these poets to do what they love to do by doing what she loves to do. So it becomes this circle of passion. Mm-hmm. And so we have a number of people within our community who do different things like that. My goal is to first of all, 2 things. One of my goals is to establish an endowment for both scholarships, so that they will always be given in Ricky's name. And then the other goal that I have at this point is to establish other artist residencies to make sure that there are plenty of different spaces for people to be creative. And right now we're doing those virtually, but hopefully we'll also have them in person at some point as well.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it's been almost 7 years. 7 years, but this is our first year, or this will be our first year coming up in March or April, our first year of being incorporated. So
that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
In terms of the folks who are in residence through the artist residency, is there an age group that you're targeting, or is this kind of open? How does that work?
For right now, it's 18 plus. Okay. We are considering adding one for a high school age. Possibly, we'd love to talk to my alma mater about potentially funding one through that program as well. Mm-hmm. As kind of an additional scholarship, but a different type. Gotcha. And that's something we're definitely thinking about. But right now it's 18 plus. And it is, of course, individuals who have not yet published a series of poems or a chapbook. So, they are actually, it's really awesome too. Right now, I'm really proud of both of them. They are shopping their manuscripts around right now, or their chapbooks around. So they're trying to, determine if they're going to either, if they get accepted, published through there, or if they're going to self-publish. And then the kind of around that too also is they will be lending some of their pieces to our zine. So we'll be creating a zine, and then which will be like directing back to them as artists. But then the proceeds, once we make that zine available from the sales, will profit the next artist in residence program. So that it becomes also a circle of passion for the AIR or the artist in residence participants as well.
That's very cool. So if there are, I guess, other artists or creatives like Kazaya that would want to, be interested in partnering with you all, how would they go about doing that? Is there, room for that?
Absolutely. We would love, definitely. For individuals who are interested in, connecting or collaborating or partnering, we've had a number of different partners. So for instance, for the sweatshirt, create unapologetically through Native Tongue Apparel, a portion of those proceeds are going directly towards the Ricky Battle Scholarship. And so, so we have different partnerships in that way as well, but partners, we are absolutely welcoming, partnerships with other artists who might be interested in either mentoring, or, providing some type of support to encourage, an aspiring artist in, a multitude of mediums. Definitely interested in that. And that's, of course you can, if you are interested in that, you can get in touch with me via the website, davieceleste.com. There's a spot for for contacting that way. I'm definitely open to that.
That's awesome. I love it. I love what you're doing. It's very similar to something I wanted to do too, is establish a scholarship fund or ways to kind of influence and empower youth earlier on, because I feel like sometimes we wait till too long. Like we try to get them in college, but there's so many students who never make it to that point, right? So like if we can reach them at the high school level or through various programs, we can never have too many of those in my mind.
Absolutely. I think it's also important to mention, Ricky Battle wouldn't have fit this 4.0 GPA. So this is a student who was, faced a lot of challenges and things that he was navigating, and he still came out just, thriving, right? But it was a journey. And so he wasn't your student that, you necessarily had your eye on in the sense of Dean's List and this and what have you. He was juggling some things that a lot of us, never have to juggle. And so, I think that's important because the scholarship is about a student who, shows, kind of, that passion, the passion within those kind of tenets of creating your own path, that despite whatever is going on, it's kind of I'm doing this. This is happening. This is, I might not look the way that people expect it to look, but I'm going to get there. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. And to have that, and that the scholarship is also unrestricted funds for them. So sometimes a student needs to get home. Sometimes a student needs to buy books. Sometimes a student needs to get stuff for their room. And we've seen it all. It's been a beautiful process, seeing I use the funds in order to do this, or sometimes I'll check in when I'll be like, hey, I'm really good at finding books on the low. You want me to, help you get that together, kind of thing. I'm telling you, I'm good at it, I even have some extra money for a printer. Really, so, I'll do that kind of stuff. Or, I remember the head of College Bound, which is Kenneth Ward, who is just an incredible individual, and also knew Ricky well. I remember he sent me a picture of one of our, our recipients, his college room, because he accompanied him to college to help him set up his college room, and that's how they used that scholarship that year. It's I think those are important too. You don't need to present a receipt all the time. These kids need things, and it isn't just the kids who Like I was what would be considered a very book smart kid. You know what I mean? I'm not the only type of student that needs these types of scholarships, and I'm also not the only type of kid that deserves being recognized by any stretch of the imagination. There's plenty to celebrate in every single student. And so that's also part of one of the things with the scholarship. And it's always so funny because of the spirit of the scholarship, it's always unanimous, or it has always been unanimous at Duke Ellington. So it's like, it's that one, like when I explain it, it's like that one, like there's no question, and that's always a beautiful thing to see as well, because there's no question in anybody's mind that, and then, with, like I said, College Bound, Mr. Ward, he knew Ricky, so he knows that one, and
Yeah.
it's just, it's been an incredibly rewarding experience. And I have to wonder how it's going to grow, but I'm super excited, to continue to do this work,
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to seeing it grow and hopefully being able to connect you with some other creatives in our community who I think would be good candidates for, wanting to give back. We had was it Tuesday night? We had a group panel for the season 1 guests, and
Nice.
we talked a little bit about, like wanting to be able to give back and to help, other artists come up and avoid some of the, the challenges that we had to go through, help them to, make progress more quickly. And, everybody can use that extra hand and that extra leg up for sure.
Absolutely. And, it is a form of philanthropy.
Mm-hmm.
That you don't have to wait until you're, either big time or global superstar or what have you. Like, there's so many opportunities for us to be able to give back, and that what might seem like a very small gesture to you can actually change the trajectory of somebody's life. Like,
absolutely.
And, especially with the arts, I want every kid, every person to know how they can create in some way. Right? Like, I know that every person has some form of art in them, and a lot of things that we don't consider art, you know what I mean? Like, but they are. And I want, and I think that's part of it too, is like, where's your outlet? You know what I mean? And know that when you figure out how you can create, like, whatever you do, it'll enhance it. And everything that you learn from there will enhance it, and if we can encourage kids even before they get to college, to really, like, instead of taking the STEM, I'm all about STEAM, first of all.
Yeah.
I'm all about it. And it's like, when you start taking that arts out, you really are taking a lot of the innovation out of what we do. And so encouraging students to figure out how they create, they can, and helping them to understand that all of the things that they learn can enhance the way in which they create, so valuable, and I think that's part of the work that I want to do with Free Your Soul and Mind, is to make more spaces for people to figure out their creativity or have spaces to be creative. I want to get some space on the Big Island, you know what I mean, where someone can come and they can do an artist residency, and then they can spend some time in a local elementary school doing a workshop, you know what I mean, or maybe it's a dance workshop, right? Like, maybe it's a visual arts workshop. Maybe they're going to, do a mural, you know what I mean, for this school that's being renovated or something. Like, to find basically coming into a space, giving and honoring that space, creating in that space, and then giving back to that space, giving thanks to that space for being a space where we can create. And like that, like I said, eventually I really do want to have in-person ones as well. I want to have virtual and in person, because I feel like, I don't want people to be hindered, but I also want to be able to have like grants that bring people out. Like, all right, come on, you're going to create out here for 3 weeks.
Right.
In the space you've never been to before. You're going to learn about this, or we're going to connect you with the community, artists that are doing a lot of the same things, but from a completely different culture, etc. Like, that's the kind of work that I want to work towards doing in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I will say being at home in Hawaii is like one of the One of the best places to create. For some reason, it's just something about being there. Like it just frees up a lot of creative juices. So, um,
Absolutely.
I definitely want to see that happen for you. That would be amazing, for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know what? I don't know if I know this, but what island are you on?
So I'm actually, I'm in DC in your hometown, but
okay. When you said home in Hawaii, I was like, wait a minute.
But my family is on Kauai, so yeah.
Hawaii, okay,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I have a friend whose family is on Kauai as well. Okay, for a moment I was like, wait a minute, did you come back?
And I wish. I'm struggling right now, with COVID and not being able to see my mom. But I'm doing my part, which is more than I can say for some other people. But we're not going to go there.
Yeah, I understand, and yes, believe me, it's the same. Like we are living switched lives in this situation because it's the same situation. Like trying to get to my mom and my dad. This is at this time. So this would be about the time I would have already gone and seen my parents for a week and a half, and I would have headed to Atlanta to see my godson and my best friends. And this is the first year I haven't done that. I don't think I've ever been like away for like Christmas. Like I've never been away from my parents for Christmas. So like this is the first time. Yeah. And New Year, this is my first in 7 years because I've been there for every birthday for my godson, including birth. And it's a challenge. It's tough being away. Have you? And I know you're asking me the questions, but have you found different ways to stay? How have you found different ways to kind of stay in touch or to stay connected?
So we do a lot of video like on Zoom or on FaceTime.
Yeah.
Kind of keeping track of the kids because they're growing so quickly, and checking in with my mom because my dad's not there anymore. So making sure she's okay, she's not doing too much, and because how they get when they get older. It's like yes. Just chill and relax. Like
oh yeah no,
she's a social butterfly too. So I'm like, Mom, it's okay. Like you don't have to be out there and doing all these things if you don't want to. Like nobody's gonna be upset. Like we all understand.
Yes, absolutely. I totally get it. So yeah, we do a lot of Zooms as well. And it's wild because talking about just kind of being out there and doing a whole bunch of different things. My mom is so involved in the community and so involved. Both my parents are. Like my mom, I mentioned in particular because she broke her foot a couple months ago, and just not being able to kind of be there and support what's it has been tough. But it's also it's what's wild about it. Or about her breaking it is a few months before, like a month or a few weeks before she broke it, we were celebrating her 70th birthday. And we did like this birthday. I did her 70th birthday. I DJ'd her 70th birthday. So she danced for a good 2 hours straight. Got this beautiful clip of her that I play over and over again of her doing Hammer Time across And then like a few weeks later, she broke her foot. I was like, oh, like, I'm so glad we did this. But, oh, man, like, it was just how different things, how quickly things can be different,
Yeah.
She's got a boot now, so we're happy. No more cast.
Right.
And she has got a great sense of humor. So I call her Bootsy Collins, and she laughs.
That's awesome.
So, but she's, both my parents just are super, 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 super active. But I'm really glad that they found ways to kind of be active, but not be out.
Yeah.
Because that's important. They've done a really good job of doing that. So.
That's amazing. Thank you. Shout out to your parents for being the teacher warriors that I'm sure have impacted the lives of many, many students.
Oh, yeah, they're both awesome. They're both awesome folks. I'm very proud of them.
Yeah, and shout outs to you too for your work, not only as a teacher, but in with FYSM. We wish you all the success in the world, and look forward to identifying some areas where we can collaborate and partner bringing the community together. So thank you so much for, coming on to the podcast and sharing your knowledge with us. We really, really appreciate it. So for folks who would like to follow you or learn more about Free Your Soul and Mind, where should they find you?
So if you'd like to follow Free Your Soul and Mind either on Facebook or on Instagram, we are at it's Actifism, so ACTIFYSM. And that's the name. You put either one of those in Facebook or IG, you'll come up with those pages. And then also actifism.com, so ACTIFYSM.com or FYSM.org. So either
Got it. Posting it in the chat right now.
Yes, thank you. But yeah, those are where you can take a look at what we're doing, and should be some more social media posts to come. Yeah.
Cool. Alrighty, guys. Well, thank you all for listening to the podcast this week. Give us a like and a share, subscribe. Hope you guys are enjoying all of the content. And with that said, we will sign off for today. Take care, everybody, and we will talk to you on the next episode. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.